What's going on, everyone? So, what a year for women's college basketball, right? I mean, first off, big shout outs to South Carolina for them to have an undefeated season for the first time since that 2016 UConn team. That was the UConn team that just like ran through college basketball for like a handful of years. It was like 3 or 4 years. But South Carolina coming in, capping off a undefeated season in such just a dominant fashion. They are just so big, strong, talented. I mean, they're gonna and many of them still have several years left. I mean, two of their biggest players in that game were freshmen. So the fact that South Carolina isn't going anywhere anytime soon, second time in the last 3 years, it's just you got to give them a ton of credit. They're going to be a powerhouse. They're going to be a force for many years. But hey, look, as you've seen with women's college basketball, you have these handful of teams every year that are just, hey, you make an argument for any of them to win. But South Carolina, big ups, big congrats. Dawn Staley to go on the historic run that she's going on and just being recognized as the coach that she is it's been great to see this year, right? And just all the highlights, period. Right? You've had this attention drawn and ratings unlike anything we've seen in women's college basketball, or in many cases just basketball, period. I mean, the numbers are like historically great. And a lot of that is just the individual players. Now, obviously, Caitlin Clark. She had a historic run by the college basketball standards. I mean, people are already willing to put her in the conversation as the GOAT of women's basketball, period. Now, obviously, she's got to still go to the WNBA. We'll see what she does and how she translates there. We've seen many in all sports, in all, both men and women's, where they are unbelievable in college and don't translate the same into the WNBA or professional sports, period. And look, Caitlin Clark, I fully believe and expect her to translate. I mean, she is unbelievable and ridiculous. But as we see with people, the pressure that and just the expectations that people have, right? Like, oh, she's got to come into the NBA or the WNBA and drop an average 30, 10, and 10. It's like, can we let her kind of carve her path first? But nonetheless, right? Caitlin Clark, if we're being honest, and you see all the haters and people in general. One, Caitlin Clark wasn't beating South Carolina. Like, Iowa wasn't gonna beat South Carolina unless Caitlin Clark went off for like 50 or 60. But she'll get the hate and the people talking. Oh, she choked. No, I mean, she dropped 18 in the first quarter. She's doing everything she could to keep them alive. They basically were just like, hey, let's try to box it on her, slow her down, and make everyone else beat us because we don't believe that they can. And they couldn't, right? I mean, again, South Carolina was just too big, too strong, too fast, too talented. And unless she just went, sicko mode, it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't in the cards. But it's not a knock on her. If anything, that's recognition of how great she is. South Carolina was like, we need to throw everything in the kitchen sink at her. If we slow her down, we'll win. And you even see Dawn in the speech talk about how she's the one of the GOATs of the sport, right? So her in general, she was the catalyst for the big explosion this year. Right, you saw what the impact she had on women's basketball. It was so exciting, and people tuning in, and she just drew so much attention, which is great for the sport, right? And as much as people don't want to clown and talk and all that stuff, like you need these polarizing figures for the sport. I mean, even men's needed it at some point, right? Like you look back through the history of the NBA. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that the NBA was bankrupt, about to be a closed organization that didn't exist. And then you have Magic and Bird and their college years, and all of a sudden that goes into the NBA, and they save the sport. And then that transitions into Michael Jordan, and the Michael Jordan transitions, into Kobe, and then LeBron, and then now you have Victor and Luka and all these. Like, again, it wasn't that long ago. And this could be that type of catalyst, right? You have all the hype and excitement and attention and everything that Caitlin Clark is drawing to the sport. It's great. And then you add in, some of these other polarizing figures, right? Angel Reese, right? You can make the argument with the rivalry and the way that they kind of polarize both female athletes as like this magic versus bird type thing, right? And that's going to translate into the WNBA. The real question is just, can they compete and can they continue to carve that star path? Because here's the thing. If at least the first year or so, Caitlin Clark, even Paige and Angel and all these players are going to go to the WNBA, and everybody's going to want to see, how do they look? How does it translate? Was the hype real or was it just a college thing? And you're going to, if you have the success, right? If Caitlin Clark translates, if Paige translates, if, Angel translates, and then eventually later on down the road, these new wave of players and, the Jujus of the world, right? Like when they get to the WNBA, if they translate, then that's going to continue the hype into women's professional sports, right? The problem is if Caitlin and Paige and Angel and all of them, they go this season to the WNBA and they're all kind of like, right? Then I think that could end up being a disaster. Right? You have things like Sabrina versus Steph. That was brilliant. That was a brilliant marketing. Sabrina went out there and she didn't embarrass herself or anything. She was excellent. Right? So it drew all this attention. It drew all this hype. It was like, man, she was doing what the guys. I mean, she would have qualified in the guys' main event. She was that good. Right? So there's already this this allure of oh man, we're starting to get, as you saw the evolution in the male athletes and the male players into professional, right? You're starting to see that into the females, right? Like they're a little more skilled, they're better shooters, right? They're more versatile. They have more of these highlight plays, right? Like there's things that you're looking at that you're going, okay, I can see the evolution of the women's basketball player, and it's exciting and people are drawn to it and people are like, oh wow, man, these girls can really hoop. But they got to be able to do it at the next level, because if they don't and they fail to do so, then now that kind of all fizzles out, and it's now the next wave, it's well, we've seen this 5 years now. They're unbelievable in college, and then you go to the pros and they're not very good, right? So you need, it puts a lot of pressure on these women, right? Because they have to basically hold up the mantle and take it to the next level, right? You look at, again, using men's as an example and a comparison. You saw the evolution of players, and then college players and high school players, and now you have all this media attention, and you have these young players before they even get to the league that are incredibly hype and have huge social media followings and NIL deals and this, that, and the other. And it's and then they go to the NBA, and when they translate, boom, it's an explosion, right? Victor Wembanyama. Now, he might be an extreme example, but it's one that I know everybody that's watching this knows who he is, rather than going with somebody else, right? But Victor Wembanyama, you look at him and you looked at all the hype and all the excitement and just everything surrounding him, and then he goes to the NBA and he continues basically all the hype and excitement and play that he had prior, right? And that's what these women need to do, right? If they can translate that into the WNBA, you're going to revolutionize the sport, because it's not going to be just one player. It's going to be 2, 3, 4. If Paige and Angel and Caitlin and then Juju and then whomever else end up coming in, and there are these big polarizing figures in college basketball that then become big polarizing figures in professional women's basketball. Now women's basketball at a professional level has exploded and skyrocketed, much like what we saw in the 80s and 90s for the NBA. And if it's handled and managed and marketed and built right, all of a sudden, 5-10 years from now, we could be looking at the WNBA as like this huge conglomerate like the NBA became. Everything had its kind of evolution point, and it all stemmed from polarizing players. And right now you have players in women's basketball that are polarized to a level that we have not yet seen in women's basketball. So this is a huge, massive opportunity for the WNBA, for its players. And it puts a ton of pressure on these players, because if they, for example, like a Scoot Henderson, right? Scoot Henderson was incredibly hyped. And many people were even talking about if should he be the number one pick over Victor? And, he's the more for sure thing, where Victor, he might have that. And, people tried to make the argument for Scoot, and he just hasn't lived up to the expectations, right? So the talk has died. The conversation has died, and then you see Brandon Miller end up, it's just, if Caitlin and these other players go into the WNBA and have the Victor Wembanyama type of impact, where it's like, oh my gosh, and now you have that draw and that polarizing effect that translates into the WNBA, I just think this is huge. This is huge for just women's basketball, period. So what a year for women's basketball, seriously. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. Pass a question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? Do you agree? Think that this has been an incredible year? Do you think that this is going to be huge for the WNBA? Do you think, no, not so much? Again, how do you feel? Whatever your thoughts are, I love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. Helps me enjoy these types of videos. I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.